Welcome to day 3 of Heal and Restore for our interactive expert-led Q&A. I'm joined today by Dr. Ronald Siegel, PsyD, who's leading our session today entitled The Challenges and Promise of Becoming Whole, Working with Difficult Emotions. We'll take just a few minutes to let everyone get settled, get present, and I'll give you an overview of today's session. Dr. Siegel is going to lead us through both a presentation and you'll get the chance to do a guided experience with him. Then we'll come together as a group to discuss some prompts, some contemplation that will take us a little bit deeper into today's theme. Lastly, you'll have the chance to ask your questions directly to Dr. Siegel. What a beautiful gift this is that you can give yourself to have access to this expert right here today, completely for free. I'm so glad that you have joined us, not only for this Heal and Restore experience. I hope you are getting so much out of the talks you've listened to so far. And if this is the first thing you're attending all week, that's great. Thank you for being here. I'm going to turn it over now to you, Dr. Siegel. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Welcome, everybody. Since we're going to be a relatively small group, if you're not engaged in something highly illegal, you might want to turn on your video so that we can actually connect with one another and have a class and be able to have a discussion. I know many of us like to multitask and be busy doing other things while sort of listening in the background. But actually, what we're going to be focusing on is why that's not very helpful if we're going to be working with difficult emotions. So just a little gentle pressure to join us. I'm not seeing a lot of takers, but if you are so moved after a bit. Pamela, deep bows to you. You are the yeah, you are the one. Here we go. You're getting joined. Here. Hi, Gloria. Thank you for joining. Fabi, it looks like you're joining. Christina, excellent. Thank you, everybody. This it'll be much more interesting. We'll be able to have a conversation together. So I thought I'd provide a little bit of an idea about why it is so hard for us to process and integrate difficult emotions, what the price we pay for that, because it's really a pretty significant price, and then do a practice which I find is really helpful for both integrating emotions and it can also be very helpful if you're a therapist or coach or you're working with others doing this as well. So why is it so hard? I think the reason it's so hard has to do with the evolution of our brains historically. That there are several propensities of the brain that are great for survival, pretty good for working with the body on a physical realm, and disastrous for working with emotions. And the first of these is perhaps the most basic um, impulse that we have as organisms, which is the impulse to move toward pleasure and move away from pain. This impulse to particularly to avert anything that's painful and pull away from anything that's painful. And it's super easy to see how effective this is and how useful this is for physical survival, right? You put your hand in a fire, no, take it away. You're much more likely to survive and live long enough to reproduce. And by the way, when we think about how the brain came to be, and this is a, Darwinian perspective, the idea is any propensities of the brain that randomly arose through mutations and the like over the years that were going to help us to survive and reproduce, well, those get passed on through the generations. Anything that doesn't tends to fall away. So this aversion response clearly was useful to us. And, avoiding lions, avoiding being super cold, even avoiding being super hungry. You could see how all these things are really good for survival. But when we get into the emotional realm, it really becomes very, very problematic. In fact, we could see that most of the disorders that we suffer from are disorders of aversion. Um, let's just take a few. I know not that many. Thank you, those of you who have your have your video on. Anybody else who can join us, this would be a great moment because we're going to do something a little interactive here, and I'd like to see your hands. But um, of you who are live, how many of you drink alcohol at least sometimes on some occasions? Okay. Many of us do. Some don't. Okay, many of us do. Of you, and those of you who aren't showing your video, just ponder whether you ever drink alcohol. And now ponder this question: who drinks it entirely for the taste? Now, we have about the most flavorful drug delivery system imaginable in a bar or a restaurant, right? But if it weren't for the inebriating effects, I suspect most of us wouldn't drink the stuff. And we can think of how this started evolutionarily. Our ancestors were hanging out. They went to a fruit tree one day that's by the bend of the river and had a snack, and it was pretty good. And then they were hungry a few days later, went back, but by now all the fruit had fallen on the ground, but they were hungry, so they picked it up, tried it. It didn't taste very good, but 10, 15 minutes later, there's this kind of nice feeling starts to come on. The worries about the lions or the other group of primates in the next valley start to subside, and it's like, I'll do more of that. And we evolved it so that now we refine absolutely any organic material except for wood, we will make an alcoholic beverage out of, right? Um, and okay, on occasional use, not a big deal, but clearly we can get into a lot of trouble with that. Other disorders, anxiety. If I'm anxious doing public speaking or flying in airplanes, but I do those things anyway, I don't have an anxiety disorder. I'm just a nervous guy. But if I start to avoid doing things because I don't want to feel the anxiety, well, then I'm on my way to having an anxiety disorder. I'm going to start avoiding parties or public speaking or job interviews, or the list is quite long of the things we can avoid based on anxiety, but it really constricts our lives a lot. Certainly, post-traumatic stress disorder is all about trying not to feel the feelings associated with something bad that happened in the past. And even depression has this aspect of aversion to it. If we think about the difference between sadness and depression, depression's kind of dead, right? Nothing has any taste, nothing is meaningful to us. We're kind of disconnected. Whereas sadness is poignant, it's alive. We can be at a funeral, somebody remembers something funny that the deceased did or said, and we're there, right? It's like, oh yeah, we can have a moments of joy remembering sweet aspects of the person that we lost. So we see that a lot of psychological suffering comes from this aversion response, and it is so automatic. It is so automatic that whenever difficult emotions come up, we tend to turn away from them. Many of us nowadays have an automatic emotion killing machine. It looks like this. And what you do is anytime during the day that any feeling comes up, you just look at it and start scrolling, and you look for some kind of dopamine hit. You look for a like on social media, somebody following me, etc. Or you doom scroll, or you look for something that will distract from this. And these objects of mass distraction now have almost everybody avoiding feeling all day long. Now, there are two other propensities of the brain that contribute to our difficulty processing and being with emotions. One of them is simply our propensity to think. This was also very, very adaptive. You can imagine our ancestors out there on the African savannah and, coming face to face with a lion. What are they going to do? Like, Lucy, you've probably seen the drawings of her. She's about, 3 feet tall. And you can imagine her coming face to face with a lion, show her teeth and her claws, but she's just this little kind of monkey figure, right? That wasn't going to work. Um, she only had a few things going for her, actually. She had uh, a fight or flight system so she could run away in an emergency. She wasn't that fast, but it could help somewhat. She was a social primate, so she could cooperate with friends and family to warn each other of danger or hunt together or do that kind of thing. She had a prehensile thumb, which was very effective, right? She could make tools, pick up sticks, and the like. But the main thing that she had that separated her from the other animals running around the savannah was this ability to think, to imagine the past, predict the future, and strategize how to survive, how to do well. But the problem with thinking, and where this dovetails with our difficulty with difficult emotions, is thinking has a very strong, what cognitive scientists call negativity bias. My pal Rick Hansen likes to say the mind and the brain is like Velcro for bad experiences and Teflon for good ones. Bad experiences stick, good ones slide right off the pan. And there's good reason for this, because if you imagine Lucy, for example, back 4.5 million years ago, she could have made one of two types of errors looking at an ambiguous situation. Let's say she's looking at a beige shape behind some bushes. And type 1 error, which actually corresponds to type 1 errors in modern scientific research, would be to say, oh my God, it's a lion, when in reality it was just a beige rock. A type 2 error would be to say, I think it's a beige rock, when in reality it was a lion. Now, she could make countless of type 1 errors, these false positive errors, and still live and pass on her DNA. One type 2 error, end of her DNA line. So we might imagine there were other sort of random mutations creating other kind of primate brains, and there were some primates who are actually kind of happy hanging around, holding hands, telling stories of luscious pieces of fruit and dynamite sexual encounters, but they weren't our ancestors. Why? Because statistically, they died before they got to reproduce. Our ancestors were going around the savannah going, oh my God, it's a lion. Oh no, that looks like a poisonous snake. Look at that plant with the spines. Remember what happened the last time? And that's the kind of minds that we inherited. So one of the reasons that we have such difficulty with painful emotions is they get reinforced by these thoughts. There's a trope that's passed around in mindfulness meditation circles for many years, which asks, how long would an emotion last if it wasn't reinforced by a thought? You want to take a guess? How long would you think it would last? Feel free to uh, either speak or put in the chat a guess. 90 seconds match. Yeah, yeah. Well, actually, Fabi or Fabi, that's it on the nose. 90 seconds is what it says in the trope being passed around. And then I thought, now how the devil did anybody ever study that? Because how are you going to get somebody to have an emotion and not get caught in the narrative about the emotion, right? Because usually what happens, my friend's done something, I think he's been really unfair to me, and I start to think, I can't believe you did that to me after all I've done for you. And when I have that thought, there comes the arousal, right? My heart rate picks up, my muscles get tense, I get all angry. And when my body gets into this state, well, that actually reinforces the emotional arousal. So I feel it more in my body. And then it's even more. And then I'm back in the thought loop. And these kind of loops can last for a few minutes, a few hours, a few days, weeks, months, years, or decades, right? If depending on what we're upset about. So, how do you study what it's like without the thoughts? Well, it turns out that trope came from a neuropsychologist named Jean Bolte Taylor. You may have come across her work. She's been pretty well known publicly. She wrote a book called Stroke of Insight about her experience having a severe left hemispheric stroke, which means that she had lost verbal ability. She couldn't string a sentence together, but the right hemisphere was still intact, and as a result, she could feel all her emotions. So something would happen, the emotion would happen, but there was no thought keeping it going. There was no story. And as a result, it only lasted about 90 seconds. And she reported that. And that's how we get this. Similarly, I have good friends, um, Bill and Susan Morgan, who had sat a 4-year silent meditation retreat. Not 4 days, not 4 weeks, 4 year silent meditation retreat. So this is a pretty big dose of this was Vipassana or mindfulness meditation. And their friends, of whom I was part of this network, uh, this was a great experiment. Like, what are they going to be like when they're done, right? And they finished. And Bill was still very much Bill, and Susan was still very much Susan, but they were lighter. And what they reported was all the same emotions arise. I get anxious, I get angry, I get sad. It all arises, but they don't last as long because they're not so reinforced by the thought. Because all that mindfulness practice, they got pretty good at bringing their attention back to moment physical sensory reality. And if we're grounded mostly in moment to moment sensory experience, thoughts come, thoughts go, but they don't grab us and they don't hook the emotion so much, and we don't get into those recursive loops where the thought creates the emotion and the emotion creates more thought, and we stay stuck. Um, the third reason why we have a lot of difficulty with this, and this has to do with the getting stuck, is what philosophers call reification, which is a fancy word for taking as solid that which is actually fluid. Now, consciousness, if we observe what's happening in our awareness moment by moment, it's pretty fluid, right? One moment there's sadness, one moment there's joy, one moment, I mean, it keeps changing, changing, changing. It's often said that consciousness is like a river, and you can never step in the same river twice because it's new water each time. It's always new, right? And actually moods change and everything, but one of the things that was adaptive for us, the same way thinking was adaptive for survival, aversion was adaptive for survival. Well, reification was adaptive for survival because it basically means recognizing patterns. In other words, remembering, oh, that fruit tree, yeah, that's by the bend in the river. I remember that, so I can go back to the fruit tree. Or that animal actually is dangerous. Remember what happened to Uncle Harry? Those kinds of memories are really important. And the idea that the world is somehow stable is very, very helpful for our survival. The problem is when we apply it, there's another one where when you apply it to the emotional realm, it creates a problem because when we have emotions, we imagine that they're going to last forever. When I'm anxious, I imagine unless I fix this somehow, I'm going to stay stuck in anxiety. A cardinal feature of depression, for example, is hopelessness. It's the thought that this is going to go on forever and the belief that it will go on forever. So part of what keeps us from having the courage to fully be with, allow, feel, and explore difficult emotions is this misperception that that they're solid, that they're stable, and they're not going to change. If I really knew that my anxiety was fluid, I'd be much more okay with it. If I really knew that the depression was going to come and go, I'd be much more okay with it. So putting these together and looking for how we're going to work with this, well, we kind of need the antidotes to these three propensities of the brain to work effectively with emotions. And in a couple of minutes, I'll lead you through an exercise which tries to cultivate these antidotes. So the antidote to aversion is going to be experiential approach. It's going to mean turning toward that which is difficult. So when sadness arises, turning toward it. And when I'm talking about turning toward it, one way to do that is with a kind of mindfulness practice in which we're rooted in the body. That's what we'll do together in a little bit, where we're just staying with the sensations of the emotion in the body and allowing it to be and not trying to fix it and having a kind of interest and curiosity in it. The antidote to the thinking problem and to the negativity bias is developing what psychologists call metacognitive awareness, which is just a fancy term for noticing that thoughts are thoughts, they're not realities, and allowing thoughts to come and go, but not necessarily believing in them all, having a kind of skeptical perspective on this. Because, when we're anxious, we have fearful thoughts all the time. When we're depressed, we have negative and pessimistic thoughts all the time. When we're sexually aroused, we have sexual thoughts all the time. I mean, our thoughts follow the whatever's going on in the heart and in the body at the time. And the antidote to reification is really reminding ourselves that everything changes. this changes too. I don't have to be afraid of it. In the world of emotions, things are never as good or as bad as they seem. It's in the emotion at the moment that things feel so challenging or so difficult to us. So with that as an introduction, let's do a little practice together. That's about developing experiential approach, stepping out of the thought stream, and letting things be fluid. Okay. And this is a practice you can do with uh, at any time. At any time. I'm going to walk you through some dominant emotions with it, but you can do this practice whenever any particular emotion arises. It's really about being with the emotion in the body. I will say something about the reification thing. I had meant to include this. Um, it is amazing how fluid emotions actually are. Can you think of your worry 3 worries ago? What were you worried about then? I can tell you my last one, but I can't count back to 3. And yet I know that at the time it felt like a really big deal. And if I didn't do something, I wasn't going to be able to get rid of it. Okay. With that as a background, let's find a comfortable and alert posture. And um, if you're sitting, sit up straight. Pretty much for the same reason that a third grade teacher says, "Now, kids, sit up straight." It helps to pay attention. And you can do this more readily with your eyes closed if you're comfortable closing your eyes. And I invite you to imagine for the posture part, a string tied to the top of your head, gently pulling up toward the sky, gently elongating the spine. And you'll notice if all is going well at the moment, you're already breathing. In fact, the body is breathing itself. And I just invite you to start by bringing the attention to the sensations of the breath, however it might be. Notice what's happening in the in-breath and the out-breath. And all we're trying to do here is gently incline our attention from the thought stream to moment sensations in the body. We want to feel what's happening in the body. And we're just using the breath as an anchor, a focus for our attention. Notice all the sensations of the in-breath, that little pause between the in and the out-breath, the sensations of the out-breath, and on to the next in-breath. And now what I invite you to do is to generate a little bit of sadness. Don't pick the saddest thing ever. Don't pick something which is likely to be overwhelming. But however you'd like to generate it with a memory or a thought or an image, just allow a little bit of sadness to arise in the body. And I invite you to notice exactly what the sadness feels like in the body. Let the breath be a little bit in the background. And just feel the sadness as a set of body sensations, fluid, changing. And if you're comfortable doing this, see if you might place your hand over the part of the body where you feel the sensations most clearly. and just breathe with it, with a kind of kind, gentle, soothing breath. Not to get rid of it, but just to really feel the sensations in the body. And thoughts may arise and pass. That's fine. We let them come and go. Just bringing the attention to the sensations in the body. How does sadness feel? And now let the sadness go and see if you might generate a little bit of fear or anxiety. Again, don't pick the scariest thing ever or the most overwhelming, but just generate enough fear and anxiety to be able to feel it in your body. And here again, notice where in the body you feel the sensations. Where does fear manifest? And if you're comfortable doing this, place your hand over that part of the body and just breathe with the moment to moment experience of fear. Ah, my old friend fear, you've been with me since the beginning. See if you can greet it with some kindness and acceptance. And just feel the sensation as it shows up in the body. And then you can allow the fear to dissipate. And next, I invite you to generate some annoyance or anger. Again, not something overwhelming, but just something where you feel some annoyance and anger. If you're a very spiritual and kind person who rarely feels annoyed or angry, just think of somebody in a political party that you don't like and bring them to mind. It'll help. And just feel the annoyance or the anger. And notice how that manifests in the body. And again, bring your hand, if you're comfortable doing this, touch your hand to the part of the body where you feel annoyance or anger. And just breathe with those sensations for a little bit. Just notice exactly how they feel in the body. Bringing kindness to these as well. And so it's really okay to feel this. And then we can let that go. And let's let ourselves generate some joy. Here, there are no limits. You can be super joyous if you like, or just a little joyous. But generate a bit of joy and notice where in the body you feel joy. And place your hand over that region. And just be with, enjoy, and notice the sensations of joy in the body. And let them be there. And now you can let the joy go and just come back to the breath for a few cycles. Just feeling the sensations of each in-breath and each out-breath. And when you're ready, if your eyes have been closed, you can open your eyes again and come back to our Zoom meeting. And I'd like to open it up now to hear your reflections, either the reflections about the ideas that I presented earlier about what are some of the factors that make it hard to be with emotions for us, as well as your experience doing the exercise, what you noticed being with the emotions in the body. And you can just, um, if you want, you know what, let's use since a lot of people are here but not with their videos on, use the hand raise. Um, let's see, where is it now? They keep moving this around. The we don't want that one. Is it under reaction to? Yeah, so that's that reaction, but I'm looking for the hand raise. Can you help us, Suzanne? Do you know where the hand raise is?
I'm looking for it, but we also have the option you can unmute yourself as well. I've just enabled that.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so either unmute yourself or in some other way indicate that you'd like to speak.
You can use the chat too.
And if you're shy about uh, saying something, um, thank you, Lisa. I'll call on you in a sec. Know that there's probably other people who've had a similar reaction or a similar thought, but they may be shyer than you are. So it's actually an act of generosity to raise your hand. Thank you. Where did you? So let's start with Lisa. Where did you find the hand raise symbol so other people can find it? You can unmute yourself, Chris. Wait, still not unmuted. Let's see if I can unmute you. How do we unmute Lisa?
I'm heading to Lisa.
Yeah, maybe you can make me a co-host as well. But is she unmuted? No?
I've just clicked ask to unmute, so once she does, it will come off.
Okay, you can unmute yourself next to the microphone symbol in the lower left-hand corner, Lisa. You should be able to do that. Okay, we'll come back to you in a little bit. Shelley, can you unmute yourself?
Oh, Lisa just came off.
Oh, Lisa, okay, we
Ready?
got you. We got you. Great.
I'm sorry, I lost my Zoom screen. Like I found the raise your hand under the reactions.
Oh, okay,
Um,
great.
then it says lower hand on there, or
Great.
raise hand or lower hand.
Okay, excellent.
And what I came up with what we just did was my um thoughts were everywhere. It was hard to sit with any emotion. Um, yeah, they were just all over the place.
Did any emotion did the emotions arise even a little bit? Did you feel a little bit of sadness or fear or anything like that?
I did. I did feel it.
But then did another thought kind of swoop in to distract you?
Yes.
Yeah, no, I mean, most of us, we become really, really, really accustomed to constantly distracting ourselves. Right. And, sometimes it's with devices and all, but sometimes it's simply with another thought that takes us away. I mean, this is one of the reasons why I'm something of a fan of doing a bit of mindfulness practice every day, because it gradually begins to train the mind to be able to stay with an experience for a little while, which makes it much, much easier to work with emotions. The problem with distracting ourselves, and we all do it, of course. The problem with it, I once had a patient who said to me, very wisely, he said, when we bury feelings, we bury them alive. They don't just go away, but they're stored inside so that then when we're in another situation that in some way reminds us of the situation where we buried the feeling, we get double the problem, right? We get all the current distress plus the distress from before, which is why it behooves us, if we can, to tend to it. But I do thank you for sharing that, because I'm sure you were not alone in that. Most of our minds are remarkably frisky these days. Thanks, Lisa. Shelley.
Hi there.
Hi.
Thank you, Dr. Siegel, for doing this. This was great. The emotion that I found the hardest to tap into was actually joy. And it was because as soon as you said, there's no limit to this, you can feel as joyous as you want to, I immediately thought about tempering it, because when I have joy in my life, I always think about, when is that going to stop?
Yeah,
And the fear of it ending.
yeah.
So that was very, as I mean, the anger and the fear and anxiety were very familiar to me. Hard sometimes to navigate and feel, but I could feel them. I allowed them to be felt. The joy was very difficult.
Yeah. Some of you may know Chris Germer, who's an old friend of mine, has done a lot to bring self-compassion yeah, into the mindfulness world and into the world more broadly. And Chris and I were in a study group decades ago, and he turned to me and he said, "Ron, you're defended against joy." And he was right, and it was for the exact same reason that you're describing, Shelley. It was because I realized I don't want to just go with it because I'm afraid of the disappointment that happens when it goes away. And it is very interesting that some of us are actually more defended against positive emotions or potentially pleasant emotions than we are the negative ones, because we so don't want to have our hearts broken. It's a really important observation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Um, Estefania. Forgive me if I didn't quite get the accent in the right place there. Nope, you're
Can
still
you click
muted.
unmute?
Click unmute. Whoops, no, that was turning off the video. Next to it, the audio, you should be able to click on it and unmute it. Nope. We'll come back to you, okay? You play
I
with
think
that.
Estefania also put her one question in the chat earlier. Estefania, do you want me to ask the question you put in the chat?
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Okay, her question from the chat was, I wonder if someone with Alzheimer's or dementia forget past traumas.
Um, I'm not very expert in this, but my understanding is that um, not at first, because what happens with most forms of dementia is they affect short-term memory before they affect long-term memory. So we go through a much longer period in which we forget where we put our keys than we do in which we forget what our brother did to us when we were a kid, unfortunately. Uh, and eventually it all goes away. It is interesting that sometimes if people aren't too freaked out about their dementia. And obviously, there's a lot of reasons to be freaked out about it. It's very scary to lose competency and lose all sorts of abilities to have control. Sometimes people get much better at living in the present. So they become a little bit more like my friends Bill and Susan. Not that they were demented, but where an emotion can arise and it doesn't stick so long because there isn't the ruminative memory of, yeah, and you did this and you did that and you did this and you did that. It's just the emotions here, and then it can flow more freely. And interestingly, my sense of psychological health is the more fluidity, the better. that way. Being able to feel emotions fully, but not get stuck in them. I remember once I was with um, my friend Jack Hornfield. He had come in to teach in a seminar that I was doing briefly, and something came up. One of the participants said something that was sad, and immediately there are just tears in his eyes hearing it. It wasn't particularly triggering for him. He was just open-hearted and present. The tears were there, lasted for a few seconds, and then the tears left, and on to the next moment. I think um, I think that's often a sign of psychological health, that we can feel it fully, but we're not stuck in it for a long time. And ironically, or just coincidentally, sometimes dementias can actually make that happen more for people. So thank you for that.
Dr.
Sarah,
Siegel, I'm sorry, we have one comment I don't want us to overlook that was
go
related
ahead,
to a previous question
please.
regarding how people felt during and after the meditation.
Okay.
Banu Siyosoda says, I just felt nothing and that makes me scared.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Thanks for catching that too, Suzanne. Um, a lot of us, our minds are very good at protecting ourselves from difficult emotions. Um, if I had a nickel for every time that I didn't feel an emotion in a situation where I felt like I should feel an emotion, I'd be quite wealthy at this point. Um, yeah, sometimes they're just not so accessible to us. The overarching principle for me is, can I be accepting of what's happening in the moment, including accepting of the fact that, all right, this exercise this way at this moment isn't bringing up feeling for me. And can I also be curious about it? Can I start to sort of notice, sometimes with people, I will ask them to do an inventory of their emotions and notice just throughout the day when they feel sadness, when they feel fear, when they feel anger, when they feel joy, just to use the emotions we name, and notice, well, some of us discover, oh yeah, I never really feel sad. Well, that's interesting. Or I never really feel scared. That's interesting. Or I never really feel joy, as we've just heard. To just be, can we be curious about this and see where it might lead and what we might learn from it, and also to be respectful of our defenses. There may be good reason why I don't feel this or that, because it wasn't safe in the past, or it's just not so safe now. So thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that. Sarah, there you go.
All
You're
righty, here
unmuted.
I am.
Perfect. You got it.
So when you just reflections in terms of when you invited us to feel where things were happening in our bodies. So for me, it seems like there were two places where things were happening in my body, and they were the same two places, depending, and they would bounce back and forth between the spot up here and then like a spot down here. I don't know if, but then whatever you were feeling, it would go like tight or like loose or heavy,
Hmm.
right? So like fear was tight, sadness was heavy, joy was like light, sort of open, but it all came from this sort of core area. And yeah, so that was just an observation I had where you were like, well, where is it sitting? And I'm like, it's all kind of sitting in the same like
Yeah.
6-inch box in my body, and it's just how that box feels at that point is what that emotion is. So yeah, anyways, I just thought, I
Yeah,
was
great.
wondering what you thought about that.
It's a fascinating observation. I think it's very often true. It's certainly true for me that the same region is often involved, or at least overlapping regions. Like, sadness sometimes is a little lower, sometimes a little higher. These things move around some. And it's fascinating that it can be the same the same region, but the sensation is really different. Right? The heavy versus the light versus the constricted. They're all different. And I'm confident if we were able to very accurately measure all the musculature in our body at this moment, we would notice that there were different patterns of contraction or relaxation. And if we could notice everything that's happening in our digestive system, we'd notice that that plays a big role because these are gut feelings, right? We use that phrase because they are intimately connected with what's going on in the gut. There are, um, biologists tell us that there are more serotonergic neurons in the digestive system than they are in the central nervous system. There, a lot's going on there. I feel sick to my stomach. Uh, we know this, so it's very, very interesting, these relationships. And the more we tune in, the more uh, accurately and in a nuanced way and rapidly we can know what we're feeling
Yeah. Yeah.
by paying attention to the body. So yeah, thank you very much. Great observation. Rose.
Thank you. Uh, when you initiated with sadness, I found that that was the most difficult one. And I don't know if it was because it was first or if it was simply that it was my mind wasn't ready to pick something. I kept bouncing around it, but I think there was some avoidance within that bouncing, just not being able to settle. And then I noticed that the fear, I was really surprised to realize that I was feeling it in my legs.
That's very interesting.
The muscles were all tightening up and just clenching. And I've also noticed, you could say in real life, that I have muscles that clench up that I don't actually have any conscious control over. In other words, if I were to say, I'm going to tense that, I don't know how to make it happen. And yet, where there are thoughts and emotions that float through and they cause the reaction. So that's something that I'm paying more attention to of late. And then I noticed some of the other emotions. I think you said anger and annoyance, and I realized how much that was facial. And then joy was high in the chest. That one was easy because yesterday morning, doing Tai Chi in the park at dawn, the birds, this whole host of birds flew overhead right when I was looking up. And that was just so beautiful to see the very early tinge of color on the clouds and this whole host of, thousands and thousands of birds in it. And the way their flapping was so sensorial and, visually and auditorily and everything. And it just made me feel so connected and alive with nature and myself. And so that was an easy one to
Yeah. No,
tap into because it was so recent.
Thank you. It is interesting, when you find, maybe it's because it's the first one, or maybe, sadness is harder to connect to. Um, I find it interesting to just reflect and sort of monitor it in my daily life. All right, which emotions readily arise, and which ones do I have more difficulty with? Just with sadness, for example. I noticed myself, this came to me meditating a few years ago, where I realized, so what's the resistance to sadness? And some of it was, well, boys don't cry, that whole thing. I love asking my male patients, how old were you when you stopped crying? And going back and trying to, I can't remember is usually the answer. And but cried as a baby, don't cry now. what happened in there. It can be very interesting to inquire. But another one, just as an example, just personal example, I realized that I associated sadness with failure. That it was the sort of being rejected in a relationship, or being home on Saturday night and when the other kids were maybe out with one another, or that kind of thing. And that the resistance to really opening to sadness was in part because there was a kind of self-esteem crash associated with it. So this is one of, you know, thousands and thousands of possible ways that this unfolds, that if we bring our attention to it, sometimes insights arise about what it's about. So thank you, Rose, for sharing that. Magda.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, first of all, for all the presentation and for taking the questions. So actually, I have a question because I understand the importance of mindfulness because of the training yourself not to get into the narrative, which is, of course, just enhancing the emotions. But then what would you say is the most important one, or how would you combine them? Traditional psychotherapy is about understanding where it's coming from and going into the memories and trying to uncover what happened and why you have all these sensitive points, and okay, while the mindfulness is more focusing on, let's focus on the present moment and let's not get caught up in all the narrative and all
That's
the
great.
story.
Great question. They're both valuable. They're both valuable. And our challenge is figuring out, when does it make more sense to stay in a narrative mode, and when does it make more sense or is more useful to stay in this more experiential mode where we're staying with it moment to moment. I'll tell you a story about the narrative mode. This is with my friends Bill and Susan, actually. So it'll be part of a coherent tale. They're about 3 years into their silent retreat. They came out in order to co-lead a retreat themselves, right? Their teachers had said, look, you can't just go silent, 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 and then boom into McDonald's. That's not going to go well. You got to ease, got to ease out of this a bit. And I was their co-leader. And I had just had an experience that was very upsetting that happened in the hospital where I work, where basically somebody had misunderstood something, thought I said something that I didn't say, but would have really been horrible to say. And instead of saying, Ron, what was that? They wound up sort of reporting me up the chain of command. And it was like, a nightmare briefly until it got cleared up, right? But anyway, it was just before I went to the silent retreat that happened. There I am, I'm on the retreat, and we're beginning, the practice before I had a chance to really talk to Bill and Susan. And I'm spending a whole day very much in this experiential mode, right? Waves of sadness about this coming up, fear, what if people think I actually did this, anger to the person, why didn't you talk to me? We could have cleared this up. No, I said this, not that. I know they sound sort of similar, but is literally a mishearing. And all this stuff is coursing through. Shame. I discovered you can feel shame even if you didn't actually do something wrong. But there I was with, shame about this. So all this stuff circling through. And then it's the end of the day, and we're teachers, so we're not just in silence. We're going to talk to one another. How you been? What's been going on, etc. And I said, well, I'm fine. Things have been good, but this thing happened like yesterday, and I tell the whole story, and Bill, I remember he's a psychologist also, so skilled psychotherapist. He listens quite mindfully to this because he's been meditating forever. And then he offered an interpretation that was just so liberating to me at the moment. He looked at me, heard the whole story, and he said, that sucks. And and I immediately felt better. Right? I immediately felt a lot better. And I realized that I could spend the whole day at this experiential level just being with the feelings, but there's something about putting it into words and having another human being understand those words and get it that was enormously, enormously relieving to me. So, Magda, you bring up a really excellent point. There's a role for these experiential practices, and they can really help us. And there's a role for narrative. There's a role for understanding in words what's going on. And there's a role for sharing that with others, with finding some place where it's safe to be able to communicate our experience with someone else. They're all important.
If I may, just one other question, which is a little bit not related to this one, but why are we blocking joy after a very traumatic experience? I mean, that has been my experience. I used to be very happy until I was mobbed at work. So I was pretty traumatized by the whole experience, and of course, pretty disappointed in people in general. So, and I find it that although I'm fine, I cannot enjoy things.
Well, I can't know what yours exactly what the dynamics are for you individually, but I can speak about it in the general case.
Generally, yeah, of course.
In the general case, there's a few aspects to it. One is that when we're under threat and after we've been traumatized, we experience ourselves as under threat. The world goes from being basically okay to being very much not okay. And what happens is we constrict our focus under those circumstances. We constrict our focus to scanning for threat. And when we're in the state of scanning for threat, we don't really open to a wide range of feelings. We're mostly kind of anxious and kind of upset. And joy requires safety, right? To really feel joy, we have to feel safety the same way play requires safety, and play and joy are closely interrelated, right? That to really play, you have to feel safe. Otherwise, it's not play, it's work or avoiding threat, that kind of thing. So I think it has to do with the way in which we narrow our attention and hold ourselves much more tightly so that things can't flow as spontaneously until we've had enough sufficient opportunities to be with all the pain about what happened, and ideally to have that be also understood by others so we're not carrying it all by ourselves. And then we can relax more. And then when we can relax more, then the joy can come back.
Thank you very much. Actually, this is very useful.
I think that's the general case,
No, but it helps a lot because I can understand that probably I still don't feel completely safe, which is why I
of
don't
course.
allow myself to relax and to feel
Yeah,
fully the joy like I used to.
that makes perfect sense. And I would encourage you to think that it's probably not permanent.
This too shall pass. Thank you very much. Thank you very
Exactly.
much.
So we just have a very few minutes. Carolyn, maybe quickly. Unmuting yourself. There you are.
Okay, I can't see anybody again, but that's okay. I think my question builds on Magda's first question. So if we're talking about healing modalities, you talked about the narrative, the mindfulness. I guess I'm just starting to learn and curious about the somatic healing process. So, you helped me figure out that yes, annoyance seems to go in my jaw more than anything else. So like, to be somewhat facetious, so what? Like, how does that somatic awareness lead to healing?
Okay. What happens is when we're no longer blocking or stopping emotions, they have a way of naturally unfolding and healing. The same way that the body has a very clear natural healing potential. Like I love Michael Mithofer, who a psychiatrist, used to be an emergency room doc, does a lot of work with psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. And Michael says when people would come into the ER, I didn't know how to fix a broken arm. I can't do that. All I know how to do is create the conditions by which the body's natural healing intelligence will fix the broken arm. So I know how to set the bone, put on a cast, give the patient instructions. I know how to do all that, but I don't know how to heal a broken bone. In the same way that the body knows how to naturally heal itself, so does the mind and the heart. And by the heart, I mean our emotional mind. And we have to create the conditions to be able to do that. And one of the conditions is finding a way to be conscious of open to and accepting of the full range of our emotions. So this kind of somatic work allows us to do that. I just put in the chat my website. Not trying to be super self-promotional, but if you want to learn more about mindfulness practice and this kind of thing and how it works with emotion, is drronsiegel.com. There's all sorts of resources there. And if you join the mailing list, you'll hear about programs and things where you can learn more. There's just a little button that says join the mailing list, and just put in your email, and then you'll hear about it. Because lots more to say about this topic. So thank you, everybody, for coming and for participating so actively. I'm sorry I didn't get to all the questions, but what can we do?
Thank you so much, Dr. Siegel, for leading us through the session, for the presentation, and for taking the time to share your wisdom with our audience. Thank you so much to everyone who participated today. I hope that you enjoy day 3's talks on emotions. We have an amazing lineup for you today. Come back tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time to do neurosomatic mindfulness with our founder, Fleet Mall. And we'll have another expert interactive Q&A session tomorrow at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy your day.